So we've got an action-packed event today, and we're going to kick it off with a quick update about the foundation. We'll share some upcoming events that you can plug into, and then we've got two great panels. First up, we have a technology and accessibility panel moderated by Eric Zenkman, co-president of the Bay Area chapter. And then we have a research panel moderated by Wayne Sackett, co-president of the Bay Area chapter. We hope to allow time for questions, but we may have to limit the amount we take due to time constraints. But you can always email your questions to the Bay Area at fightingblindness.org, and we'll get those answered for you. So the mission of the Foundation Fighting Blindness is to drive research that will provide preventions, treatment, and cures for people affected by retinitis pigmentosa, age-related macular degeneration, Usher syndrome, and the entire spectrum of retinal diseases. The Foundation Fighting Blindness has raised over $800 million for retinal research and public health education. We've identified over 270 retinal disease-causing genes. We currently support over 40 clinical trials, and we funded the first FDA-approved gene therapy for the eye, Luxturna, and we funded the first FDA-approved bionic retina. Over the past 10 to 15 years, there's been a tremendous surge in clinical trials. We are at a very exciting juncture as more emerging therapies move into human studies. While the Foundation funds research at a variety of stages, we have a focus on moving therapies into clinical trials. We fund a variety of modalities, gene therapies, stem cells, and small molecules. We fund the best retinal disease researchers around the globe as well. We have a fantastic genetic testing program. Our no-cost genetic testing program is open to anybody with a clinical diagnosis of an inherited retinal disease. And by getting tested, we can increase the number of gene-specific therapies that are being developed and connect patients to potential clinical trials. And there's many ways for you to get involved locally here in the Bay Area, from volunteering to fundraising to events. Our Bay Area chapter is busy preparing for a very event-filled 2022. And our Bay Area leadership team that's putting on the events like these educational events today, our social events, and our fundraising events is led by a team of volunteers. Eric Zenkman, our co-president, Wayne Sackett, co-president, Jonathan Chester, vice president, Lisa Lloyd is our resource chair, Ram Srinivasan and Rob Farmer are our education co-chairs, and Kathy Kwok is our revenue chair. And I'd like to introduce Kathy Kwok right now to talk about two of our upcoming events. And then Kathy will pass the mic over to Eric Zenkman, who will kick off our technology panel.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Kathy.
Okay. Hey, this is Kathy Kwok, and I am so excited to, first off, have you here participating in this Safe Site Saturday. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this great information that will be shared today. So I have two exciting events to tell you about. The first one is called Hope from Home, and it's our second annual virtual gala that will be held on Sunday, March 6th. And this is an exciting event that hopefully everyone can join. Last year was the first annual event, and it was really great. And it had lots of great entertainment and breakout rooms. And the most exciting thing actually to me were the live auction and silent auction. And these are, since this is a national event, what was exciting was to note all of the different items that were auctioned off. And so actually one action item I have for everyone on this call is everyone knows someone who either owns a restaurant or has a travel contact. And we are actually responsible for offering several baskets for the silent auction. And so I'm hoping that everyone on this call can kind of look into your contacts and think about asking someone to donate something for the silent auction or the live auction. We already have some wine tasting, a foursome at the Pasadena Golf Club in Monterey. And what I'd like to do is put together some silent auction baskets for the gala, again on March 6th. So that's one event that's happening. And the other exciting news I have to share is that we finally got confirmation for our face-to-face in-person vision walk. And that's going to be held on Saturday. Oh, excuse me? Sorry. That's going to be held on Saturday, June 4th at Golden Gate Park. And it's going to be the first in-person walk we've had for 3 years. So the past 2 walks have been virtual in 2020, of course, and this year in 2021. And so we're super excited that we're going to have an in-person walk, and I'm hoping everyone can join us. I also have an action item for everyone for this, and that is if you could register your team early, because we have a large goal and we're hoping to raise a lot of money for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. So I think the earlier that you can register your team, the earlier you can begin to raise funds and ask people to donate. So those are my 2 exciting events that are coming up. I'm hoping everyone here can join. And so I think now I will hand it over to Eric Zankman.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. The first panel is going to be addressing technology and accessibility for the low vision community. And the 2 speakers that we have are Matt Philippenko and Zach Afridi. And I'll give a little bit of information about their backgrounds, and then I'll hand it over first to Matt and then to Zach. Matt has worked at Microsoft for 9 years, specializing in office deployment, servicing, activation, and accessibility. Matt's a huge advocate for accessibility, and his role at Microsoft involves building accessible products and showcasing them to customers.
Check Microsoft.
At age 19, Matt was diagnosed as legally blind with an inherited retinal disease called Stargardt. Matt's vision loss has positioned him to be a leader in accessibility at Microsoft, ensuring that the company continues to build products with the low vision community in mind. Prior to Microsoft, Matt was a small business owner with companies focused on production, media, and IT.
Zach, Matt.
Matt is the newest member of the Foundation Fighting Blindness Accessibility Task Force, which makes sure that the foundation is using the latest tools and programs so that everything we do becomes more and more accessible. And today, Matt will be highlighting several programs and products where Microsoft has put a big focus on accessibility. Zach Afridi will be the second speaker on the panel. Zach is the hands-on CEO of Vision Buddy, the world's first TV watching system for the visually impaired. He has expertise in business development, sales, strategy partnerships, and data analytics. He also has 2 master's degrees, one in business administration, the other in information systems, and over 15 years of experience leading sales and marketing teams for numerous startups. And Zach is extremely passionate about helping the low vision community and improving their lives through technology. So today, Matt will be presenting Vision Buddy, which is his company's flagship product for low vision. So I'll hand it over to Matt first.
Eric, maybe let's start with Zach. Matt just popped off the call in the room.
Okay. He might be having technology issues, ironically. So, okay, so let's start with Zach.
Okay, sure, yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Eric, for this opportunity. Very excited about presenting Vision Buddy. I'm gonna pull up my presentation. And if you have any questions, you can stop me in the middle of presentation or afterwards. Let's see. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, Zach, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Vision Buddy. First, the team, myself. I've got two partners, Abdul and Daniel. And the product I'm going to be talking about is called Vision Buddy. So what is Vision Buddy? Basically, I'll just give you a little background. Both Abdul and I, we have a background in VR, virtual reality. Abdul is also very familiar with artificial intelligence, and we both worked on some research project in the low vision world, where we found out that VR products like this one can really help people that are visually impaired. But the problem we saw in the market was that there were VR products, but they were very complicated, complex, and it was not really easy to use. So we decided to create a company, and our mission was to come up with a product that is simple and easy to use, and it helps people that are visually impaired and improves their quality of life. Based on myself, I've been in the low vision world for almost 5-6 years. I see there are a lot of products, and unfortunately, most of the products are outdated. They don't do a really good job. And I've also seen that a lot of visually impaired people are kind of bucketed with the blind folks. So some of the technologies that they're using are kind of designed for people with extreme low vision or for blindness. So our goal was to come up with a product that not only improves their quality of life, but also helps them with small little tasks, day-to-day tasks, can also help them at work, and can also improve their day-to-day living and quality of life. So that was our mission, is to make simple products that improve quality of life for the low vision community. Just a little background, we did some research, and as we know, low vision is one of the fastest growing disabilities around the world. There are around 400 million people with various retinal diseases around the world. In the US, there are 93 million people that are at a high risk of serious vision loss. And there are around 12 million people over the age of 40 that have a vision impairment. There was also another interesting survey done. There is a lot of fear of losing sight. I guess the main reason for that is because once you start losing sight, you are depending on others. You lose that independence, you go through a lot. People that lose sight also go through depression, isolation, and different forms of anxiety. So there is a high fear of losing sight. And unfortunately, there are not really many products on the market that can help them regain their independence. Okay, so the problem, as I talked about, the fear of losing sight and going into depression and isolation. I know you guys already know how an eye condition like macular degeneration can affect your vision. This is just a small little example. So the picture on the left, that is normal vision. Then you've got the initial stages of macular degeneration. So you see that central scotoma developing, and then, this is the later stages of macular degeneration. So based on, how they start losing vision, there are no products, folks that start losing vision cannot do simple things in life, like, for example, watching their favorite TV shows. The TV becomes blur. They can't really look at faces. Everything's a blur around them. We had one lady that was unable to set her thermostat because she just could not see, and she had to call her son, who lived a few streets away from her, every time to help her set the thermostat up. So these small little things affect their lives a lot. When we gathered this data, we decided to come up with a simple technology. And based on the research that was done at Johns Hopkins, we knew that VR technology can really help people who are visually impaired. And the reason VR headsets like this can really help is because of two reasons. Number one is the way the image gets projected really close to the eyes. It is really satisfying for a low vision person to have that image really close to their eyes. And secondly, the field of view that they provide. So VR headset like ours, we have the highest field of view. It is at 100-degree field of view. So products like this, VR headsets like this can really help a low vision person improve their vision 6 to 10 times. So our solution was to come up with a technology that is easy to use, that can help them watch TV, read, and use the magnification to look around and do day-to-day tasks. So our technology, the way our technology works, and to start off, we focused on TV watching because that is one of the main pastimes of people that are elderly. They enjoy their TV, and we've had so many people who bought our product. They're averaging anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day watching TV. We had one veteran who is spending almost 10 hours a day watching TV. So TV watching not only keeps them entertained, they also feel included. For example, one person told me that all the football games are family events, and before Vision Buddy, he could not really enjoy it. He would just listen to people, what's happening, and then he would just cheer with them as they would score a touchdown. But with Vision Buddy, he now feels included because he can see with much more clarity the details of the game, and he's really enjoying watching TV with his family. The technology is very simple. We've got a headset, I showed you, and then we've got a transmitter. So this is the transmitter. Now the transmitter can be connected to any video source, and once this is connected, it will project HD quality video directly inside the goggles. And then we apply our algorithms to project the image in such a way which is really satisfying for a low vision person to watch. We have patents on this technology. And we're the only company right now that provides this type of a setup for a low vision person. Briefly about the team. So Eric already introduced me. We've got Abdul, who's the co-CEO and also the COO. Abdul's got a lot of background in the startup world. He's a product guy. The way we designed the product was mostly coming from Abdul. And again, he was also involved in Johns Hopkins research with our previous company. Daniel is our CTO, and Daniel's got over 30 years of experience in software development and R&D. He's very familiar with VR and AR type of things. So together we form a team that has a lot of knowledge in the low vision area, and we have a ton of knowledge in the technology sector, and we're kind of merging those two and coming up with solutions that are easy to use for the low vision community. So there was a market survey done, and the top 3 things a low vision person would want a solution for was TV watching, magnification, and reading. And based on that, we did create a product that helps them watch TV. It also has a magnification mode, so you can, use a magnifier. It goes up to 10x. You can use that magnifier to magnify things. And then there's also a reading mode, which is a reading converted mode. Yep. And it also has an OCR. So we're covering the 3 areas that we feel can really enhance the lives of low vision people. So I briefly talked about TV watching solution. Again, a transmitter can be connected to any type of a video source. If you have a cable TV or a satellite, or even you're using streaming devices, you can connect that to it, and the image gets projected right inside the goggles. Not only that, but also you can connect the transmitter to your computer. So it is also a work solution for people that are low vision and want to see the spreadsheets or want to read a PDF file that gets projected right inside. And then, of course, we have the magnification goes up to 10x, and then we also have the OCR. Our business model is very simple. Right now, we sell direct. We've got some strategic partners. Within the strategic partnerships, I would like to mention that we just signed with CNIB and also Vision Australia. They loved our devices, both the countries in Canada. CNIB is in Canada. They're selling our product now. Vision Australia is going to start selling next year, which is almost in a month. So we're moving very fast, and it is the reason we're moving so fast is because the likability and our product is becoming really popular with a low vision community. And then we also have the dealer network. In that dealer network, we've got, low vision distributors. And then we also have, government organizations like the VA that sells our product. We launched the product back in 2020 and for beta testing. The real launch was around June of last year. Since then, we've not only improved our hardware, so we went from an 8-megapixel camera to a standard definition video to a 16-megapixel camera now, and with HD video. We have also expanded to international markets, like I mentioned. The next thing for us is that we are working on an AI-driven platform for low vision, and we're creating this hub that would be a connected hub that would not only help people, stream videos and movies and their favorite things, but can also be a center for other accessories. Like you could be connecting an external camera to it. You could be for kids that are low vision and be using it for homework, can also play video games on it. So that idea, we're playing around with that idea, and there are a lot of interesting things that are coming up, and we would love to share those with you as they come along. So that's about it. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If we have time, I have a 2-minute video that I can show you. If we don't, then we can skip the video. The video is on our website.
Hey, Zach, we've got a few minutes to do that.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our website. Our website is getvisionbuddy.com, or if you just simply put Vision Buddy in Google search, you will come up. And I'm going to go ahead and play the video, and let me know if you can hear the volume on the video. If not, then I will make some adjustments here to make sure we do.
The secret.
Were you able to hear the volume on this?
Yes, we were.
Okay, awesome.
The secret for a happy long marriage, I think, is a lot of give and take, a lot of patience, and a lot of love.
To have that many years of happy, successful marriage is really a blessing.
My name is Doreen. I have lived in Colorado for many years, and I have macular degeneration in both eyes. I've had that for probably about 6 years. It's very hard to understand unless you have it. I can see you, but part of your face has got a dead spot on it. I can't see the center vision.
Yeah, it's frustrating. She really got, impatient because of trying to do things that she'd been able to do in the past, and now she could no longer do those.
I kid Jim a lot because I call him my seeing eye dog because he has to see everything for me. My husband found Vision Buddy on television. I was very skeptical and thought, well, it sounds good, but a lot of things sound good and they turn out to be nothing. When I first put it on, I thought, wow, I can't really believe it because it was such a change. It's almost like having a blindfold on. And then when you put the Vision Buddy on, you can see again.
Once we got the Vision Buddy and she saw what would go on, I had to ask questions about, can you see this or can you do that? And she said, well, let me see. Yeah, I can do that. And it was really elating to say that, my God, this is what we've been looking for. Now, many of the things she's starting to give up, she can go back to and say, gee, I didn't think this was ever going to happen. And now you can realize that I can read again and I can go through and take care of the bills, write the checks.
I particularly like to watch baseball, and I've not been able to watch baseball without the Vision Buddy. Charlie boy, go! We started following the Rockies when they first started in Colorado. It's our favorite team, and we cheer for them every time.
You know, Vision Buddy is one step as I see it. We've got an improvement now that says, wow, look at here what this has done for us. How can we now go off and build on that? What else can we add to that? I think we've only scratched the surface. Where are we going? Who knows? It's got to be exciting.
I definitely would recommend Vision Buddy to anybody. It's a wonderful invention. I couldn't do without it. I would not want to do without it. I think it's just miraculous.
Okay,
The secret
I'm
for
just
happy long marriage, I
pausing the
think,
video. Thank you.
is a lot of
That's it. Okay, Nathan, do you have the control back? I just handed it over to you.
Thank you, Zach. And we actually had a question in the chat, I think. Does the Vision Buddy help all patients with low vision? Does it help both patients with central and peripheral vision loss? That was one question. Question two is, do you have a certain vision cutoff? And have you heard of side effects from patients who use it, such as headache, etc.?
Okay, great questions. So the first question, yes, it helps patients with central vision loss like macular degeneration or Stargardt's. It also helps patients with peripheral vision loss like RP. It also helps patients with glaucoma, so like kind of an overall vision loss. So yes, it works with all different kinds of eye conditions. As long as you still have some vision left, the device is going to enhance that and you'll be able to see through it. The cutoff point, we don't really have a cutoff point. I can tell you our range is we have patients that are 20/100 all the way to 20/800. Our sweet spot is patients that have a visual acuity of 20/400 or 20/600. That's where most of our patients lie, but even it works with extreme low vision. And I think that was it. Did I miss anything on that?
Well, Nathan, I have a few questions, and then if other people have questions, then maybe you can jump in and provide those afterwards. But
absolutely,
I did have a few questions that I was going to ask, and I can just get your take on it. One of the things that we wanted to know is what's your take on smart speakers, like devices that use Siri or Alexa used for accessibility? Have you gotten involved in any of that, and do you have any thoughts on how that can help?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Smart speakers are really helpful, and I've seen them being used at retirement centers, and I've also seen them being used at our customers' houses. Alexa is a really amazing tool to have. And that is something we're also going in that direction. So with our smart connected hub, that is one of the features that we want to provide our customers, is to have some kind of a setup, AI type of a setup built in the hub, so they can talk to it. And let's say they ask how is the weather, and it kind of interacts with them.
Right. And one of the things I would say is the Vision Buddy. It is simple to use. There are a lot of products out there that take a little bit more training, but this is actually, it's pretty intuitive. So I would say, and then having some sort of smart speaker device would even make it easier. So one question I would ask is what do you think is coming in the next 20 years in terms of accessibility?
So I think, with the whole AI, artificial intelligence, taking over, and also with a lot of development in the VR space, I think that would be the way of the future, where you can take an image from real world, enhance it, and project it back to a low vision person the way they like to see it. And of course, right now these goggles are pretty a little bigger, bulkier. You would go into something like regular normal glasses, but with a wider field of view, with these amazing cameras and with this amazing AI engine built in. So that is as far as the hardware technology is concerned. And of course, we've got experts on here that are into gene therapy and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure, we're not far away from maybe some kind of a mechanical eye that, can be a replacement for your regular eye. Those are my thoughts, yeah.
Good. So one question is, how do you get the beta testers for your product, and how would you recommend if anybody wanted to be a beta tester for some low vision technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can, most of our beta testers are our customers. We do ask them if they want to be part of a beta test. And once we release a new software, we send it to them. They give us their feedback. Now, I'd like to mention is that once you get a Vision Buddy, all the software upgrades are free. So for example, if we come up with a newer version, all you have to do is just connect this to a computer and we will push the new software upgrade to you. If you want to be a beta tester, just send us an email. Our email is hello@visionbuddy.io. So you can send us an email. You can also go online to our website, www.getvisionbuddy.com, and fill out a form and just in the notes say, I would like to be a beta tester, and one of my team members will contact you.
Great.
And
Okay.
we can share that email address in the follow-up from this meeting, Zach.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. So did we have any other questions that came through chat, or do any other folks have any questions?
There was a comment in chat from Marcia saying that she does use Alexa to contact her contacts and to make phone calls if she can't find her phone. So she finds it helpful. And she found it helpful when she fell and needed help getting up.
Okay, awesome. And that is a really good point, right? So services like Alexa do help the low vision community a lot. And our goal is to have one device that is really easily integrated in all these services. So and that is currently we have this hub, but we are working, to upgrade this into more of an AI type of a device that can do all these things for a low vision person. And I would just like to take also a minute. We get this question. I don't know. I did not get asked, but how the question usually I get is that how is this different for watching TV than some of the other devices on the market, right? There are a lot of wearables on the market. The big difference is that if you get any other wearable, they will ask you to use the magnification mode or the magnifier or the front-facing camera to look at your TV screen. And when you do that, the problem with that is that when you're looking at a screen through a camera and then projecting it on screen, you lose a lot of quality. And if you have glare on the TV, or if you have an older TV, the quality is lost. So we kind of bypass that. Of course, we do have a front-facing camera, and that is used for magnification. But for TV watching, again, we came up with this hub, this transmitter that connects directly to the TV and then projects that image right inside the goggles. And what you get is an HD quality video right inside it. And once you put this on, you have the ability to even magnify it further. And you can magnify it to a point where you are as if you're sitting in front of an IMAX screen. So you're kind of surrounded by the screen. And it's a very immersive feeling. And because of the giant size of the screen, because of the quality of the image, a low vision person really enjoys watching TV through it.
Yeah, Zach, I would just add too that when you're looking at it, because I've demoed it, you can zoom in as well.
Yes,
To different parts of the of the screen. And it is like being at an IMAX. And when because it's a direct feed right into it, the TV doesn't even need to be on. So you could be watching a program and if no one else is watching the actual physical television, you can turn the television off and you'll get the direct feed in.
Absolutely. And the distance between the transmitter and the headset can be up to 40 to 50 feet. And I'll give you one small example. We had one veteran that just went through surgery and was not able to sit upright to watch TV. So the VA got him a vision buddy. So while lying in his bed facing the ceiling, he was able to put this on and was able to watch TV. So there are a lot of use cases for the product. So you don't even have to be in the same room where your TV is. You could be lying in your bed and still able to watch TV on it.
Right. And if you're zoomed in, you could actually turn your head left and right, and you could actually see different parts of the screen. So it's like it is like virtual reality.
Yep, absolutely.
So
could it be by other more than one individual? Can you hear me?
we didn't hear what you said.
Could two persons use the same device? 3 persons?
Oh, can multiple people use the device?
Yep, absolutely. I'll give you an example. We have a retirement center that bought a transmitter and they have connected up to 3 vision buddies to it. So they all can watch movies at the same time. So one transmitter, you can connect up to 4 headsets to it. Yes, if you're watching it with a family member and you're low vision, you can put this on so you can watch TV through this, and the family members can watch TV through their regular TV.
What's the distance range from the transmitter? The distance?
40 to 50 feet. So that is 40 feet to 50 feet.
Well, I mean, in different rooms, could it be what?
Yes. Yes, you can watch it in different rooms. Yes.
Very good, very good.
So one question came in, can it do intensity inversion?
Intensity inversion is, does that mean just the contrast and doing the setting, how the picture is being displayed? Is that what intensity inversion is?
That's what I would think, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Doris, are you able to come off of mute to clarify?
Yeah, Doris, feel free to ask the question directly.
We can hear you.
Okay, Henry, ask the question.
So, you mean intensity inversion?
What do you mean by it?
So change, white to black and black to white.
So like on your phone, on your iPhone, you could change it from reading black letters on a white background to white letters on a black background.
Yeah. So you can do that. We have a reading mode that is inverted. So it has a black background with white letters on it for higher contrast.
Thank you.
The answer is yes.
Okay. Well, we found out that Matt had a power failure, and he came through. There was a storm. Do you know any more about that, Nathan?
Yeah, he's only able to join via cell phone, and his entire presentation is built as a as a screen shared presentation to run you through some of the things. So Matt's offered to join us on a future Save Site Saturday call. So we're gonna, if there's no more questions for Zach, and I do see one in the chat that I'll ask you in a second, but we can go ahead and move on to the research panel after Zach answers Kim's question. And Kim wants to know if any of your patients who use this device are children or teens, or is it only for adults?
No, we have kids and teenagers using our device. Our device recently, we found out, is very popular. It can be very popular in schools also because it can get connected to a smart board. So one of our dealers in Georgia is giving these to schools so the transmitter can be connected to a smart board, and a low vision kid can put this on and see whatever the teacher's doing on that smart board. And that smart board gets projected right inside the goggles. And then, of course, we have the magnification mode, so they can switch to a magnification mode and see their surrounding. They can see their teacher's face or the whiteboard. So yes, it can be used by kids and by teenagers. And you can also connect it to a computer, like I said. On the computer side, we, of course, are developing a newer software that will be more, because this device was originally designed for TV watching. For computer, Abdul and Daniel are working on a newer technology that would connect directly to your computer or your iPad, and it will project that image inside the goggles.
Great. And Zach, we have two more questions from the chat, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up with those. But number one, is this covered by insurance? And then number two, is there any degradation with the video if more people are connected to the receiver, or is the quality the same no matter if it's one or four people connecting?
Yeah. So question one, currently, unfortunately, is not being covered by insurance. We do have some customers that were able to approve a partial payment from their insurance company, but that is between the patient and their insurance company, but they don't cover. Only funded places like if you're a veteran, the Veteran Affairs would cover it, DOR would cover it, but that's about it. I know there are some programs that are run at state level, so you can maybe ask for a grant from them and they may cover it. As far as the quality when connecting multiple headset, no, it does not make a difference on that. This is a very powerful unit, the transmitter that we have. The signal it sends out can easily handle up to 4 headsets at a time.
And there's one other question that came in, which is how much does it cost?
So the cost of the product is $2,995, and that includes the headset, the transmitter, and it comes with a bunch of accessories. It comes with a 1-year warranty, and of course we provide customer support or any kind of technical support. But the product is very easy and simple to use, and it also includes any software upgrades as we improve our software. That could be given for free.
Okay, and then one other question is, what if you have age-related near vision, such as needing reading glasses? Does it work when it's within someone's focal range like that?
Yeah, so yes, it does. And you may have to kind of experiment with your glasses on and your glasses off. So there's enough space to wear your reading glasses inside it. So if you have a condition like that, you can put your glasses on and put the headset on and see if you can see better through it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Zach.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
And we'll provide Zach's contact info in the follow-up for this event. So if you have any further questions or think of something afterward, you can reach out and ask him. And also, if you're interested in being a beta tester, we can provide that email address for that as well. But thank you so much, Zach, for joining us. And thank you, Eric, for moderating our technology panel. I'd love to introduce Wayne Sakic, our co-president, who's going to moderate our research panel with 2 esteemed doctors.
Thanks so much, Nathan. And also thank you to Zach and Eric and the technology panel for such an interesting, demonstration of what's going on. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm Wayne Sakic. I'm the co-president along with Eric of the Bay Area chapter. And my kind of general interest from my work as a biotech business executive really focuses on the innovation side of genetic medicines and specifically for inherited retinal disease. And in that context, I'm incredibly pleased to welcome Dr. Paul Sieving, and Dr. Jackie Duncan. I'll introduce Dr. Sieving first, hand over the floor to him, and then introduce Dr. Duncan after that. So without further ado, let me read the biography that's been provided. Dr. Paul Sieving is a professor at the UC Davis Eye Center, holds the Neil and MJ Kelly Presidential Endowed Chair in Vitreoretinal Research at UC Davis. His specialty is identifying the genetic cause of blinding inherited diseases of the retina and macula, and to bring cell and gene therapies to patients. His team at the NIH in Washington, D.C. is currently conducting a phase 1 human clinical trial of a gene therapy for juvenile X-linked retinoschisis, a condition that causes impaired vision that begins in childhood and occurs exclusively in males. Dr. Sieving is a leader whose exceptional research and initiatives as the former director of the National Eye Institute have launched a wave of innovation in the diagnosis and treatment of eye diseases that guides physicians and scientists today and across the US for years to come. At UC Davis, his work, continues to build on this strong foundation, working with patients who have genetic retinal diseases and developing fundamental approaches to repairing injured cells and tissues. He's an elected member of the US National Academy of Medicine and also the German National Academy of Sciences. And he has published more than 250 journal articles and book chapters. And before I turn it over and get out of the way between hearing, what can be described as like really the Paul McCartney or whatever, Beyonce or whoever your favorite person is of eye disease today, I do want to read a couple of notes from Francis Collins, who wrote a really nice public letter as he retired as. Okay, I just unmuted myself. I just wanted to read really quickly some notes from Francis Collins in his retirement from the NEI, where he said, Dr. Sieving is one of the most modest leaders around, and he's also truly a Renaissance man, being well-versed in history, physics, the full spectrum of medical research, including basic science, clinical research, and bioengineering. His scientific accomplishments are internationally recognized. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Sieving. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. That's a very generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Be here meaning on Zoom in the Bay Area, and now living close to the Bay Area, just 70 miles northeast of San Francisco in Sacramento. I did enjoy the time when I was at NIH as director of the National Eye Institute. It was really an honor to work with all of the dynamic scientists and clinicians in the vision research community. Just a personal note, I would say in retrospect, one of the real pleasures was to park right next to Tony Fauci, which meant that at least a couple times a week I could ask his opinion on something, and he's pretty knowledgeable even about vision. So that was interesting. I'm going to oh, wonderful. There it is. That was magic. Okay. And I'll make it full screen. Here we go. There we go. Okay, good. I'd like to spend about 13 slides on ideas in what's happening with retinal degenerations. Now that I'm back seeing patients here at the University of California, Davis, it's really clear that over the last decade and 2 decades, major things have happened that are benefiting all of us and all of the individuals and patients who have retinal degenerations. It's also a pleasure to be with Jackie Duncan. Jackie is superb in retinitis pigmentosa and in Stargardt right there in San Francisco. I would like to advance the slide. I'm not sure who has control of that. I'm seeing that I do not.
Try your space bar.
Nope. Nope. How about we stop share and see if we can start over again here. Screen share gets me back to the same point. You can see the slides, but okay, let's try this one. Okay, good. So what's new for inherited retinal diseases over the past 20 years? It's really phenomenal what's happened to diagnostic equipment. Part of that is standardizing equipment so that testing can be done at multiple institutions as part of clinical trials. We have ERG diagnostic equipment, really superb new equipment. We have ways of imaging with optical coherence tomography. On that scale, things are really moving ahead, and some of those tests are very specific for the inherited retinal dystrophy conditions in teasing out rod and cone function. And now we can actually look individually at the photoreceptors with adaptive optics. In San Francisco, Jackie Duncan and Austin Rorda are doing this. And here at UC Davis, Doctors Ed Pugh and Ravi Janel are designing new instruments to look at, for instance, the normal movement, the normal breathing, you could say, of photoreceptors. So we're right down at the cell level. That is phenomenal. And artificial vision is coming online. We have lots and lots of data. And fortunately, the new director of the National Eye Institute is himself an expert on data manipulation. So I think there will be considerable support to move all of the data we have in retinal dystrophies into a different level of understanding. And of course, as was mentioned, there are a lot of clinical trials that are being conducted. If we look at the cases themselves, here are 3 types of inherited retinal dystrophy. I know that some of you can see it and others can't. So let me just describe that on the top image is a classical case of retinitis pigmentosa with thinning of the RPE and pigment accumulating in the periphery, and only the centralmost part of vision is remaining. In the middle is another kind of RP, X-linked recessive RP. And for those of you who can clearly see these pictures, you can notice that there is a difference at the top and the bottom. And on the bottom, a case of Stargardt macular degeneration. These cases have been around for 100 years. Well, they've been around longer than that, but we have been looking at them clinically for 100 years. But one of the things that is fundamentally new in the last 20 years is to understand the genetic makeup of them. So at the top, that is a mutation in the rhodopsin gene. And in the middle, a mutation in the RPGR gene, which causes X-linked RP type 3. And at the bottom, the ABCA4 gene. So all of that happened in about the year 2000. There was really a fundamental change for all of medicine in the year 2000. The entire human genome DNA sequence was identified. That was an effort led by Francis Collins. It was about a 15-year effort, very concentrated, done at many laboratories, research laboratories here in the United States and internationally. And ultimately, it turns out that we as human beings have about 20,000 different genes in order to live and function. And 300 to 350 of those genes have already been identified as causing retinitis pigmentosa. So the middle bullet here, that event, identifying the genes in the human body, that has fundamentally changed both the clinical context for inherited retinal disease and the basic ability, the laboratory ability to study the cell biology of these conditions. And of course, having the DNA means one can do diagnosis. And getting back into the game with retinitis pigmentosa subjects, I thought that DNA diagnosis would clarify things. In fact, it makes it even more complicated. And the reason is, apologize here for the complicated slide, but this slide says that in a single gene, the RPGR gene that causes X-linked RP, currently there are known to be 635 different mutations in a single gene. Many of those we know are responsible for disease, but about 40% of those mutations, we really don't know whether they cause disease or not. And that makes it a real complicated effort to understand how things are playing out in the family. As Dr. Duncan does, and as I do, we as clinicians look very carefully at this genetic data, and we put it together with the information that you provide, that the subjects provide about their family. That leads to a diagnosis that has implications for other family members. This, by the way, is a single one of the 350 genes that cause RP. This is a national program funded by the US government called ClinVar, or clinical variation in the genotype. I'm on a panel that is looking at this one gene. Consequently, that I've got these data, but genetics is only becoming more complicated, and I'm looking forward in the next 10 years to understanding further how the gene relates to the disease. That will be a real move forward. Thinking about clinical diagnosis, let's say that you or someone else receives a diagnosis. And then the question is, what really does it mean? What does it mean clinically? Is it going to change over the next year? So testing a year later is warranted to compare.
Doctor, excuse me, but there's a lot of noise on your mic, I believe, and it might be the papers that are in front of the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. I'll clean that up.
Thanks.
Examining individuals after 6 months or a year is really a worthwhile thing to know if it is changing or is progressing. Then the question is my family at risk? As the previous slides have said, sometimes the genetics and the DNA diagnosis clears that up, but other times it is difficult to know. And the best way is for other family members to be examined. And then what can be expected down the road? What's going to happen in the future? That's a very difficult question. Critical information to address that question comes from testing for the current reserve capacity of the retina. How much vision is left? And that's done by ERG recordings and looking at rods and cells and cones with OCT. So all of this is part of real clinical care for individuals who have inherited retinal degenerations. What else is changing? Well, science and medicine are now going hand in hand, courtesy of the genome in the year 2001. Bench to bedside. That was the term in the 2000s, saying we're going to take laboratory bench knowledge and we're going to take it to the clinical bedside. If I remember back about 20 years, that was the phrase that was in vogue, bench to bedside. But then in the case of doing gene therapy and testing that first in mice or in the research environment, and then taking it to the bedside and doing trials with humans, we found that we had to go back to the bench. We had to go back to design stronger delivery methods, stronger vectors, different promoters. And once that middle condition is met, then you return again to the bedside. So these are evolving questions of science. And through all of this, moving medicine forward is really a partnership among all of us, among patients and physicians and scientists and families. This is a community event. So looking forward to the next decade, what do I think is going to happen? Well, I think that genetic diagnosis will improve, and part of that will clarify progression. So if you have X-linked RP of a particular stage today, what can we expect in 5 and 10 years? That will improve genetic diagnostics. Gene therapy is going to advance, and I think it will become a reality. Right now, it works for one single gene out of the 350 genes that cause retinal dystrophies. And then there will be gene agnostic treatments. So let me just explain that. Gene therapy requires knowing the gene in order to treat it. But what we really want is penicillin. Penicillin works against multiple different organisms, or gene agnostic will work against multiple different genes. And progress is being made in that. In the area of stem cells, retina cell rescue is going to be coming online. And there is productive work happening with stem cells for cell replacement. So I think these are what we can expect in the next 10 years. I just want to end with 3 slides about a specific condition. This is one that I study a lot. I've been working on this for about 20 years, called X-linked retinoschisis. X-linked means that it only affects men. It never affects women. It's a congenital condition. Children, babies, infants are born with this, and it causes early age vision loss to a level of approximately 20/50, or severe cases 20/200. And it can progress. In fact, it does progress very slowly. In terms of the numbers of individuals, of men who are affected in the US, one can estimate 10,000 to 12,000 men in the country affected with this, which is more, as a reference, more affected by X-linked retinoschisis, more affected than hemophilia B, which, as we know, gets lots of attention for therapy and gene therapy. In terms of the condition itself, with the new technology we have, the optical coherence tomography, one can actually see the splitting that happens in the retina. And ultimately, gene therapy hopes to close those cavities and to restore visual function and to protect it against future changes. So I was fortunate about 10 years ago, 7 years ago, to begin a clinical trial while I was at the National Eye Institute. In 2014, we filed our application with the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and began treating individuals. And we were excited when we saw an indication of a response in the retina. On the right side at the top is an image looking at the retina with this optical coherence tomography, looking at the cavities that are in the retina that are tearing the retina apart. But after we gave the the vector, 2 weeks later, those cavities had closed. And that does not happen by chance. But this is one indication, and we need many more to actually believe it ourselves. But it looks like we are on the road to finding a gene therapy treatment for this one more condition of inherited retinal degeneration. And then finally, let me just mention what's happening here in Sacramento at the University of California at Davis. We have launched a Center for Ocular Regenerative Therapy, or CORT, C-O-R-T. This is a comprehensive clinical center for inherited retinal disease or dystrophy patients. There are 3 of us at the moment who are focused on this. Myself and Ala Mushiri, a clinician scientist and a retina surgeon, and Suma Shankar, who is a medical geneticist and involved in DNA diagnostics. So we're offering integrated care and research for patients here in the upper regions of California. And this center also has a research component called translational research to take the bench ideas and translate them into the bedside help for people. There's some interesting trials going on. Dr. Susanna Park is working with bone marrow derived stem cells and will be mounting, actually she is already doing a trial of injecting those into the retina, the human retina with retinitis pigmentosa. I'm working on this X-linked retinoschisis gene therapy, as the last slide indicated. Ala Mushiri has an interesting project because there is a large monkey colony here at UC Davis, a very large colony, and several of those monkeys have been found to have a gene mutation that causes cone dystrophy. It leads to color blindness, so it's called achromatopsia, no color vision. And Ala Mushiri is doing gene therapy in those monkeys as preparatory to getting to human. And Dr. Glenn Yu working on AMD gene therapy, again, in this large monkey colony. And then for organoids and stem cells, again, there are several people at the bottom listed who are working on stem cells. So this new center, and this is my last slide, this new center will be for all eye patients, but in particular, a fairly large area is being devoted specifically to the inherited retinal dystrophies. So thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to meet some of you by Zoom today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sieving. And I'll speak for, as the father of a 4-year-old boy that has juvenile X-linked retinoschisis. And there are, I think, a dozen or two from across the country who Nathan and the foundation have reached out to about this webinar. Just on behalf of all of us, these are maybe 10 or 13 or 14 of those 10 to 20,000 here in the US that you mentioned. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And we're so honored to have you. And so we'll save many of the questions that have been posted in the chat for later. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Jackie Duncan. So Dr. Duncan is an ophthalmologist who specializes in treating retinal degenerative diseases such as RP and age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in Americans over 50. Both conditions run in families and have no cure. In addition, her expertise includes diagnosing and treating retinal diseases such as Usher syndrome, cone-rod dystrophy, and Stargardt disease. She is skilled in using experimental techniques to prevent or slow these conditions. In her research, Dr. Duncan is studying treatments to preserve vision as well as devices to stimulate visual perception. She has received research funding from Research to Prevent Blindness, the Carl Kersinger Foundation, Hope for Vision, and the American Geriatric Society, in addition to receiving a Career Development Award from the Foundation Fighting Blindness. And she has been on UCSF faculty since 2000. And with that, Dr. Duncan, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gosh, what a terrific privilege, really an honor to be invited to speak with you all at Safe Sight Saturday today. I receive a tremendous amount of support from the Foundation Fighting Blindness, and I'm one of their biggest, staunchest supporters as well. So it's really a treat to be here. It's really somewhat daunting, but incredibly humbling to follow Dr. Paul Sieving, who's been a leader in our field for decades and a personal role model to me for many, many years. So what a treat to be here with you all virtually today. Hopefully next year we can all get together in person. So I was asked to speak a little bit about clinical trials for retinal degenerations. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So we'll get started. And of course, as Dr. Sieving mentioned, I don't have time to talk about all the therapeutic trials in retinal degenerations. The best news in the world is that there is so much happening right now in our field, but I'll try and hit some highlights today. I do work with a number of different organizations that provide me with support. Many of them are developing treatments for patients with inherited retinal degenerations, for which I consult or serve on the scientific advisory board. And the list of organizations that provide support for my research or have done so is listed on this slide as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm not going to cover every therapeutic trial because there's just too much to talk about. So instead, today in 2021, I'd like to give you an overview of what I consider to be right now the top 5 clinical trials for patients with inherited retinal degenerations. A broad category we'll start with, as Dr. Sieving mentioned, is gene augmentation. A huge advance in our field occurred in 2017 with the first gene-specific therapy in all of medicine approved by the FDA for patients with RPE65 related retinal degeneration. That led to a tremendous amount of research in developing therapies for other forms of inherited retinal degeneration. So we'll talk about that today. Well, there are also genes for which we'd like to develop treatments that aren't able to be treated exactly the same way as the RPE65 gene was. And so other approaches are being developed, including antisense oligonucleotides for people who have mutations in big genes like CEP290 and USH2A, as well as rhodopsin. We'll talk about those a little later today. And very exciting development is that of gene editing, where you could potentially fix a genetic mutation or spelling mistake in the DNA in a cell that doesn't divide, like photoreceptors, which are our vision cells. So these are being used not only for big genes that don't fit into the package we use for RPE65, but also to eliminate proteins that are inherited in a way called autosomal dominant. So that's another very new development that I'll talk to you about during this discussion today. Optogenetics is a way of delivering genes that express proteins that sense light. So potentially a way to restore sight to patients who have lost a lot of vision due to extensive photoreceptor loss. And I'll finish today by talking with you about a consortium of clinical centers around the world that are working to study rare inherited retinal degenerations. So you would imagine that if someone had inherited a disease that caused the retina not to work and eventually not to see, you could correct the genetic defect, right? It should be easy if you could figure out what the genetic cause was to just fix the problem by delivering the right gene. Well, it turns out that this is more complicated than you would think. This is not as straightforward as it seems. Usually it's very difficult to change the DNA in cells that don't divide. And that's because if you change the DNA in cells, sometimes that can cause problems like tumors. So it's challenging to change DNA sequences in cells that don't divide. So we're trying to develop new strategies. New therapies are using strategies to modify genetic mutations that cause disease. You'd ideally want to just cut and correct and stick back the DNA. So we'll talk about that a little bit during this presentation today. As I mentioned before, the field of inherited retinal degenerations was truly revolutionized in 2017 when voretigene neparvovec received FDA approval. Again, this was the first FDA approved treatment for patients with a specific gene defect in all of medicine. And this was for people who have retinal degeneration associated with changes in a gene called RPE65. This is a gene that is expressed not in the photoreceptors, but in the cells that live under the retina, the RPE cells. This was really exciting because it actually led to improvement in vision for people who had this form of inherited retinal degeneration. It was a tremendous success, and it led to a number of other people being excited about developing genes, therapies for different forms of inherited retinal degeneration. The way they delivered the gene was using a special virus as a package to deliver the RPE65 gene to cells that didn't express that. So a bunch of other genes also fit within that same viral package called adeno-associated virus, or AAV. A current clinical trial that is underway also for people with early onset retinal degeneration but associated with a different gene called GUCY2D is underway right now and is enrolling patients to try and deliver this different gene that causes Leber congenital amaurosis and early onset retinal degeneration to vision cells. So that's currently in clinical trials. But there's a number of other clinical trials that either are ongoing or have been initiated for different genes that cause different forms of vision loss. There are many different genes that cause achromatopsia, which is an inability to see color, a problem with proteins that are expressed by the cone vision cells. So there's clinical trials for the two most common genetic forms of achromatopsia, CNGB3 and CNGA3. Those fit nicely into the adeno-associated viral vector, and so clinical trials are studying replacement of those two genes right now. There are other common genes that cause vision loss, which are too big to fit into the AAV gene. These include ABCA4, which causes Stargardt disease, Dr. Sieving mentioned a few minutes ago, myosin 7A, which causes Usher syndrome type 1, also too big to fit into the adeno-associated viral vector. So those clinical trials use a different kind of delivery device called lentivirus, and those were delivered in the subretinal space to deliver these big genes. As Dr. Sieving mentioned, RPGR is the most common cause of X-linked retinitis pigmentosa. That's also using the adeno-associated viral vector, and 3 different trials are still enrolling patients for that form of inherited retinal degeneration. And also another X-linked form of retinal degeneration called choroideremia is being delivered with adeno-associated viral vector too. So those are all currently enrolling patients, and many of these have encountered hurdles during the course of the trials. Some of the trials have been associated with inflammation. Other ones have been delivered and have not demonstrated the kind of visual improvement that was observed with RPE65, perhaps because of the nature of the vision cells being the target rather than the cells under the retina, or perhaps because we aren't looking at the right ways of measuring whether the treatment is helpful or not. So we also need better ways of measuring how vision is affected by retinal degenerations. And these are called outcome measures. These are ways we determine how the vision cells are working and surviving. So I'd like at the end of today's talk to tell you about how important it is to do natural history studies on patients with retinal degenerations. More on that later in this talk. So I mentioned before that only certain genes will fit into the adeno-associated viral delivery method that was very successfully used for RPE65. Some of them are too big, and very common causes like CEP290 and USH2A are in that category. They're too big to fit into AAV. So a different approach would be to identify the most common of the different mutations in those genes and try and change the way that gene is turned into protein. So the way we do that is not by changing the DNA itself, but by changing the message that DNA uses to turn into a protein. That molecule is called RNA. So instead of changing the DNA, which can sometimes cause problems with the cell, if we can just intercept the message and make the message different, so a different protein is produced, perhaps that would be an effective treatment. So a number of clinical trials are using antisense oligonucleotides. These are little molecules that interfere with the way the DNA is turned into a protein using a molecule called RNA. These are given in the clinic in the vitreous, and it's the center of the eye. They don't have to use a retinal detachment to deliver these treatments, which might be safer and might be more effective, but may not last as long, may have to be repeated many times. Currently, clinical trials are underway looking at the most common forms of early onset retinal degeneration associated with a gene called CEP290, the most common cause of Usher syndrome type 2, which is Usher syndrome type 2A. And also that's a very common cause of autosomal recessive retinitis pigmentosa with normal hearing. And then finally, Dr. Sieving mentioned rhodopsin, autosomal dominant, is an autosomal dominant cause of retinitis pigmentosa. The most common form of that is associated with a gene called P23H, a mutation called P23H, which is also being targeted using this antisense oligonucleotide approach. So time will tell if this is an effective and safe approach, but preliminary studies look very promising. As we mentioned before, for mutations too big to fit into the adeno-associated viral vector, ideally, like you'd like to do is find a way to just change that spelling error such that the DNA has a sequence that turns a normal protein turns into a normal protein. So a very exciting approach was developed in recent years called Crispr. Crispr stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. So we call it Crispr for short. This is a way to identify a specific DNA sequence with a guide RNA that then changes the DNA by making a break, correcting the genetic mutation, and then sticking it all back together again so that it can be turned into a normal protein. So this is a very exciting approach that is currently in clinical trials. Again, for large genes like CEP290, the first patient that was treated with CRISPR in their body was reported a little over a year and a half ago and was used for patients with the CEP290 form of early onset retinal degeneration or Leber congenital amaurosis. Later that year, a little more than 1 year ago, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded to two of the scientists that developed CRISPR technology. And that was recognizing what a tremendous advance in science CRISPR technology represents. And then just a couple months ago, some of the same patients that were initially treated in March 2020 were reported to have had promising safety results after 3 to 6 months of follow-up in patients who received CRISPR technology treatment for the CEP290 form of Leber congenital amaurosis. So stay tuned. The hope is that CRISPR will also provide helpful treatment for certain forms of inherited retinal degeneration. Well, for people who have advanced vision loss, it would really be helpful to try, and patients really would love to see something to help restore some of their sight. So one approach is an approach called optogenetics. This is a technique where we introduce a protein that is able to respond to light. And these, in our eyes, the only cells that can really respond to light are the vision cells, the rods and the cone photoreceptors. So optogenetics is an approach where you take a light sensing protein from another source and you introduce it into cells that usually don't respond to light. So the first one of these that was in clinical trials was using a protein called channel rhodopsin. This was derived from algae. It allows algae to respond to light. It's a very simple sort of protein, but it does allow the algae to respond to light. And that has been administered to patients with advanced vision loss using adeno-associated viral vectors for many years. Those trials are still ongoing. Well, then an advance on that approach was using an optimized form of channel rhodopsin, which was paired with some goggles that would allow the exact most sensitive light channel or wavelength sort of type of light that channel rhodopsin responds to be delivered to the eyes. So this was called Crimson R. And the reason I'm mentioning this today is that the very first demonstration of patients who were treated with optogenetics that showed improved vision, these are people who had not seen anything for many, many years, demonstrated the ability to see little objects on a table and see objects in the environment, was reported earlier this year. So partial restoration of sight using optogenetics with an optimized form of channel rhodopsin was reported this year, and that's a very exciting development. We're trying to, people are also trying to make different optogenetics more effective by using cone opsins. That's these are more sensitive and may respond faster than channel rhodopsin from algae. And clinical trials using either M-cone opsin or multi-characteristic opsin are either underway right now or in development. These also may be more sensitive and quicker to respond than the ones that have been developed so far, which have already shown some early partial restoration of sight for people with profound vision loss from retinitis pigmentosa. So the last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is how do we measure whether patients with inherited retinal degenerations are benefiting from any of these treatments we're developing. It's true that retinal degenerations are not common diseases. And so most retinal specialists don't see very many of them. And they're spread out all over the world. Patients that are affected with these diseases are not all located in small centers where the research is happening. So in an effort to try and identify and involve as many patients as possible in trials for inherited retinal degenerations, the Foundation Fighting Blindness has established a consortium. This is a network of centers and collaborators with expertise in patients with retinal degenerations. We've partnered together to conduct large multi-center natural history studies through this network. We're all using the exact same methods and approaches, and it in fact facilitates collaboration and improves the quality of our studies. Currently, we're using the consortium to conduct natural history studies. This is going to help us identify the very best, most sensitive way of determining whether vision cells are surviving or being safely treated with different therapies in the future. We're trying to identify the things that will give us the most information about how vision cells are responding to treatments. And we're hoping to identify the patients that are most likely to be good candidates for treatments that might benefit from new therapies. We plan to disseminate and share our findings widely to try and accelerate the development of therapies for inherited retinal degenerations. This slide shows a current map of the clinical sites around the United States, South America, United Kingdom, the EU, and Israel that are participating in our consortium. And I'm really privileged to be working with all of these investigators to develop natural history studies currently of USH2A-related retinal degeneration, EYS-related retinal degeneration, USH1F-related or PCDH15-related retinal degeneration, and other trials that are currently in the planning stages, so we can identify the best ways of knowing whether treatments are helpful for patients with these conditions. So, what's new in inherited retinal degenerations? Here's a list of my top 5 developments in retinal diseases. First, gene therapy. Gene augmentation using adeno-associated viral vector has already received approval by the FDA for RPE65, led to the development of many other clinical trials that are ongoing. Number 2, antisense oligonucleotides. Clinical trials are underway to try and modify the way the message from the DNA gets turned into a protein for genes that are not easily delivered using adeno-associated viral vectors. Number 3, gene editing with CRISPR. This may allow us to correct mutations in cells that don't divide. This might be a really helpful treatment with patients who have mutations in large genes or dominant genes that need to be corrected so that we eliminate a protein that's causing harm. Number 4, optogenetics may allow us to restore sight to people who have profound photoreceptor loss by delivering photosensitive light-sensing proteins to cells that don't usually respond to light. And number 5, development of a partnership of a consortium of centers to try and carry out clinical trials for patients with retinal degenerations. And I'd like to thank all the sources that support this work, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is great. Thank you so much. 2 really wonderful presentations. And let me just dive right into some of the questions we've received in the chat. This can be to either of the panelists. The first is, it looks like so many of the ongoing clinical trials, so preclinical lab-based testing in animals, but actually ones where the FDA is overseeing the development of a trial in humans, depend on knowing your genetic mutation. So the first question would be, how do you get genetic testing?
Dr. Sieving, you want to take that one, or would you like me to address that one?
Well, I think both of us will say, go to a program that does genetic testing. Dr. Duncan does it. I do it at Davis. Others do it at Stanford. Genetic testing is available. Once you get the results of the genetic test, however, as I said, the results become complicated. It is not common to get a straightforward, clear, decisive answer out of a genetic test. The tests that are done check about 300 different genes that are involved in retinal degenerations, and very often multiple genes will come back with a small nick in it instead of a complete cut that will destroy the function of the gene. So that's when you really have to ask Dr. Duncan what's going on, and ask myself, how do you interpret this? And the interpretation really depends. It's based on a clinical examination. So the genetic test by itself, it's an intriguing idea, but it's not the complete story.
Yeah, I'd like to just follow up with that and give a shameless plug for the Foundation Fighting Blindness My Retina Tracker Registry Program, which someone, I think it was Nathan or someone, had put up a slide a minute ago. The Foundation Fighting Blindness has developed a registry for patients called My Retina Tracker. And if patients participate in the My Retina Tracker registry, the genetic testing and genetic counseling to explain and interpret the results of the genetic testing are available at no cost. This is a wonderful program. So again, right now, we can identify through this kind of approach a genetic cause of retinal degeneration about 60 to 70% of the time. So that means even if you have genetic testing, there is a reasonable chance that we will not know for sure which gene is responsible for your vision loss. And as Dr. Sieving said, the interpretation of the results is very complicated. So we work closely with genetic counselors, and the no-cost genetic testing through the My Retina Tracker program provides genetic counseling to everyone that participates in that program to try and understand the results. Furthermore, there's research underway through programs like ClinGen, which works with ClinVar that Dr. Sieving mentioned, to try and understand, just as he said, in the context of what the patient's findings are, what does this spelling change mean? Does it mean anything at all, or is it just a red herring? Everyone's DNA is slightly different from the persons next to them. So this is definitely a future frontier for retinal degenerations. And we're all working very hard. The more patients that get tested, the more we learn and the more knowledgeable we can be about how different genetic changes cause vision loss.
Great. That's really good. And I'll, if I could spend 30 seconds sharing our personal experience, we're one of the lucky ones where we, had a clinical exam under, the kind of OCT. They were able to see that kind of hub and spoke. That's, really characteristic of the X-linked retinoschisis. We then did the genetic testing. It was a known variant that's causative of the genetic mutation. And right away we had the answer. And so, doing the genetic testing will give you information. And of course, that then allowed us to then be seen kind of serially by an expert that now can track, okay, here's what the rate of progression of your son's disease looks like, which has been incredibly informative for us when we think about, kind of his life going forward. So knowledge is important. It's one piece of the overall puzzle. And I guess I can't say how thankful I am for the foundation, because in many other rare diseases, people talk about this diagnostic odyssey where they spend years and years going to, pulling your kid out of school, going to a specialist, being told, I don't know what you have. And then you do it again, then you do it again, then you do it for years, all the while your kid is degenerating. And we never experienced that. So we were just lucky in so many ways. And the foundation is a big reason to thank for that. Here's the next question would be, how does someone get involved in a clinical trial? And so for either of the panelists.
Dr. Duncan, your turn.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, that's an excellent question. And again, recognizing that patients with retinal degenerations don't all live within a mile of centers that are conducting the research, the Foundation Fighting Blindness My Retina Tracker program allows you to learn about trials that might be of interest to you. This is a patient-driven resource where if you participate in this registry, you will receive periodic information about trials. And the information is yours to do with as you will. You can reach out to the investigators and say, please tell me more. I would like to be considered for this study, or you can throw it away. They don't share your information anybody. I would encourage you to reach out to your retina doctor or perhaps someone with the Foundation Fighting Blindness to find out a little more about what's involved and to find out whether that might be helpful for you. But we appreciate that there are patients all over the place that don't have easy access to these studies. And because these are retinal degenerations that are not very common, our goal is to really reach out to patients who are affected no matter where they might be. This is one reason we're building a consortium of centers to try and conduct trials at as many places as we can create infrastructure to try and increase access and reach out to patients where they are to improve their ability to participate in studies. Realize though, one quick thing, clinical trials are not treatments. Clinical trials are exactly that. They are trials. So we have to do clinical trials to make any kind of advancement or discoveries. And we depend completely on patients who want to participate in the development of these treatments. But it's really important to understand that a lot of them don't end up helping the people who participate in the study. They absolutely help us understand more about the disease, and they're critical to developing new treatments. But it's not, patients should sometimes get the mistaken idea that if they can get into a clinical trial, they'll have a treatment that's going to fix them. And that is not the case. It's really important to understand what's involved in the trial, whether or not you might be assigned to a placebo or an active group, what potential risks might happen, how much time is required of you, what kind of testing will be involved. All of these are incredibly important questions that you need to discuss with the person that is potentially enrolling you in the trial. These are important questions that you have, and it's not the right decision for every person. Not every person is at a point in their life when they can devote the time and energy, and it's really quite an altruistic thing to be part of a clinical trial, because what you're doing is advancing knowledge. It's not a way to get yourself a treatment that is not available to anybody else, because we really can't find out if these treatments work unless we do the trial.
I would support those statements. It's really important, as Dr. Duncan said, to realize these are not guaranteed treatments. These are trials that explore the possibility of developing something useful. It's part of my mentioning bench to bedside. The trial first starts by working on cells and genes. It goes to mice. Often mice are made specifically with the disease caused by that genetic trait. Mice are treated successfully, and if successfully, then plans go to human. And it's at that stage that a trial is being done. So the trial is not guaranteed to benefit you. But the only way that benefit can happen is by participating. I would also say that the centers that are doing these kinds of trials have experts who understand the disease. So one can expect excellent clinical information and clinical care as a part of participating in a trial. I will finally then mention one other source of information on clinical trials, and that is the government website called clinicaltrials.gov, clinicaltrials.gov. There are many trials that are going on. If you want to about trials for heart disease or kidney disease or liver or lung or eyes or retina, go to clinicaltrials.gov and look. But be prepared to spend several hours understanding what that site is telling you. And then if you find something of interest, there will be contact information that you can get a hold of the investigators or the company directly to ask about participating.
Great. We have one question about clinical trials, and then we can move on to implications of genetic testing. So from Mary Hibbard in the chat, she asks, if you participate in one trial, does that preclude you or prohibit you from participating in one in the future?
Not necessarily, but possibly. It depends on the specifics of each trial. But as a blanket statement, I would say no, it does not prohibit you from participating in something later on. Of course, every answer has to be qualified, so a little caution on that answer.
Yeah, that is right there is a very important question to ask whenever you participate in a trial. It is definitely the case that certain types of trials might prevent you from being a part of a future study. Ones that affect the DNA or ones that involve stem cells may prevent you from being in other studies, but other ones may not. Like Dr. Sieving said, some of them are of treatments that may be eliminated from your body after a certain period of time, and you might be able to be in a trial afterwards, but very important to ask that question before you participate in a treatment trial.
Great. Our next two questions I'm going to group together because they have kind of similar threads, and these are from Alan and John together in the chat. And the two questions are, should family members get genetic testing even if they do not have the disease? And then the other question, which is related, is should children of parents who are afflicted by Stargardts specifically be genetically tested?
Start with that one. Dr. Sieving, you want me to go?
I think you'll have some good answers. I'd like to hear them.
Oh, sure. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so those are great questions. Sometimes we give a result from genetic testing in a patient that we know has a retinal degeneration. And sometimes the result is really straightforward and we can say, yes, this is definitely the cause and we're done. More often than not, though, it is not so straightforward. More often than not, especially if it's inherited in a way called autosomal recessive, it can be very helpful to test the parents to know whether each of the genetic changes that is identified in the patient came from a different parent. And that means that it's inherited in a way called intrans, one from each parent. That helps us confirm that is the gene responsible for the vision loss. So there is a way through the My Retina Tracker program to have family variant testing. It's not free, but it's valuable and very helpful. And that can sometimes it can help us clarify inheritance in families. Sometimes it can help us confirm that a mutation is responsible for disease. And sometimes it just gives people peace of mind to know whether, to what extent they are at risk of developing a problem or their future children may or may not be at risk. So I certainly encourage genetic testing of parents of affected people when the disease is being inherited in an autosomal recessive manner. Also with autosomal dominant disease, sometimes a patient is identified to have an autosomal dominant disease and nobody else in the family has it. So sometimes it's helpful to have parental testing there to know whether it's the kind of gene that sometimes is what we call variably expressed, where somebody can have a genetic mutation but have no symptoms, or whether it's a brand new mutation in that person that does not affect either of the parents. So it can be very helpful to test parents of affected individuals. The other question was, do children of patients with Stargardt disease need to be tested? So I think, if I understood the question correctly, so I think the belief, the current sort of opinion on to answer that question is, children under the age of 18 that have no symptoms should probably not undergo genetic testing unless they have some symptoms, because if they have no evidence of any vision problems, they're not likely to be having children themselves, and they're not likely to pass it on to other people. Stargardt disease in particular is inherited in a way called autosomal recessive. So children of affected individuals are pretty unlikely to be affected themselves unless the affected individual marries a person and has children with somebody who happens to be a carrier. It happens, not very commonly, but it can happen. But I think children who are not affected with any symptoms, we recommend not testing them until they're sort of likely to have their own children. And realizing that Stargardt in particular being a recessive disease, if you are not having children with people to whom you will have some familial connection, the chances of having an affected child if you have Stargardt disease yourself is pretty uncommon. So unless you were to have a child with someone to whom you are related, and it's very important to undergo genetic counseling to make sure that you investigate those types of familial connections, so sometimes are not apparent initially. It's pretty uncommon for people who have Stargardt disease to pass that on, unless it's always very nuanced. The whole field of inherited retinal degenerations is super nuanced. There is an autosomal dominant form of Stargardt disease, which is not associated with ABCA4, but is dominantly inherited, in which case the chances of their children being affected is greater. So another reason to have genetic testing to figure out exactly which kind of Stargardt disease you have. And then depending on those results, if your children have no symptoms, we usually don't recommend testing for the children of affected Stargardt patients unless they have symptoms. I hope that answers the question. Very complicated as with everything in inherited retinal degenerations.
I would agree. Very, very well said. And I support what Dr. Duncan is saying and what the field advocates, and that is not testing children under the age of 18 unless there is clinical reason to do that. And I would just say that genetics, genes are extremely important for life, for disease, but that's what clinicians are there for also, to understand whether or not disease looks like it's present. You can have a gene change without having apparent disease, and it's far better to get a full examination in order to understand what's really going on with yourself. As Wayne Sackett just said, knowledge is enabling.
Question comes from Alan, who's dialed in from Kansas City. And I think this is directed to Dr. Paul Sieving. Just with respect to X-linked retinoschisis, how close are we to the treatment being widely available?
Oh, that's a big question. I'd like to reframe that question, though. Widely available, it is not available at this point because we are in the testing mode. Two trials were initiated several years ago. The one that I initiated is continuing, but it was slowed down tremendously by COVID over the past year, and so we're getting it started again. The other trial ran into obstacles and is on pause, long or short term. They don't know, we don't know. It depends on how the field is going. So we are still at the starting point of understanding how to do the treatment and whether the treatment will work. Once that occurs, it's still going to be several years before it would be clinically available. But we're not at the point yet of several years. We're at the point of seeing whether anything can work.
Next one is from Joseph here in San Francisco, also a retinoschisis patient, asking about the risk of detachment during cataract surgery. So if either of you want to take that on from a clinical perspective.
Jackie, Dr. Duncan, I'm curious. Each of us has opinions. Medicine is an art form and not a rule book. So you're going to get two opinions on this.
Well, I have to defer to Dr. Sieving, who's certainly got many more years of experience taking care of patients than I have. I will say that certainly whenever we do surgery, there's risks associated with that. And patients with with X-linked retinal schisis are at slightly greater risk of retinal detachment than patients who don't have X-linked retinal schisis. However, I think many patients undergo cataract surgery safely with X-linked retinoschisis, and it is a very helpful treatment for them. So I wouldn't say don't do it just because you have X-linked retinoschisis. I think it's worth discussing the risks and benefits with your doctor, depending on your specific case, because there's a big range of severity and different kinds of manifestations of X-linked retinoschisis with respect specifically to the peripheral schisis cavities. Like every patient with X-linked retinoschisis has splitting in the center, almost 100% of people do, but not everybody has peripheral changes that will put them at increased risk of retinal detachment. So I think it's, again, like everything else in retinal degenerations, very hard to come up with blanket statements that are universally the case. And in conversation with your retinal specialist, you can probably get a very clear understanding of, hopefully a pretty clear understanding of the risks that would be associated with cataract surgery for you. I can say for sure, many patients are really benefited from that treatment. So I think if it's done with the right people in the right patients, it can be very helpful. Dr. Sieving, what are your thoughts?
I quite agree. Retinoschisis is a condition that has a wide range of severity. The acuity can be minimally or modestly affected, or it can be severely affected. Retinal detachment risk is increased, perhaps as much as 30-fold over an eye without retinoschisis. But beyond those blanket statements, some eyes, a retinal surgeon can look in and say, this retina is at risk, high risk. or can look in and say, I don't see any risk shaping up in the periphery. So I would start with a good retinal exam and then go ahead. It'll benefit your vision.
Good. I think turning back to clinical trials, we have a question in the chat from Marion, who's asking about the central fovea. And she says, considering how important that is for human vision, are there any gene therapies or stem cell therapies that directly target disturbances in those cells in the fovea?
Do you want to take that, Dr. Sieving, or want me to give it a stab?
That's a very important question. Their vision is graded from the centralmost part of the retina to the peripheral retina. The centralmost part of the retina is there for reading the magazine or watching the TV or seeing the face of a friend down the street. So that very central part is critical for the maximal enjoyment of vision. As a consequence, however, we would like not to experiment on this most central part of vision. Because that would, if it fails, that would cause the greatest risk of vision impairment. Ultimately, we will get there, but that generally is not the point of a clinical trial. However, there are some conditions in which that centralmost part of vision is directly affected. I had mentioned the monkey colony here at UC Davis. It's a national colony. There are about 8 of these spread across the country, distributed across the country. And in the monkey colony, there are several animals that have the centralmost part of vision affected. It's a form of cone photoreceptor dystrophy. Technically, it's called achromatopsia or color blindness, total color blindness, not I can't see red or I can't see green, but total, I don't see color. And the fovea is impacted by that. There are trials going on for achromatopsia. They're going slowly. Results are not in on those, but I think those are the only purposeful trials that are targeting the fovea. And I know Dr. Duncan has even more information.
Well, just one thing, thank you. Everything that you said is absolutely correct. And when people retain any kind of foveal function, as you said correctly, we try to avoid jeopardizing those cells because they are so special. They are wired uniquely to have very strong connections to the brain. The brain is really primed to see things that light that is administered to the fovea. So for that reason, there is one other thing I wanted to mention. There are some forms of optogenetic trials that are targeting those foveal cells after they have lost the ability to respond to light. They've lost the machinery of the inner and outer segments where the light is turned into a message the brain can understand. Sometimes the cell bodies, the nuclei still exist for a long time. And so there are some optogenetic approaches that are specifically targeting those cells because they have such a unique representation in the cortex. The thought is that those might be really wonderful ones after they've lost all their ability to see. They might be great ones to try and restore sight to. So there are some optogenetic approaches that are specifically trying to target cells at the fovea that have not completely gone away, although they've lost their ability to respond to light, the hope of restoring their ability and maybe preserving or restoring some fine central acuity.
And I will say, just thank you so much for taking all the questions. We're getting to the end of time, so I have just a few more. One I would say, Jackie and Paul, as we go through the presentations, you'll see the list of ongoing clinical trials and ongoing areas of research. If you are a patient that's affected by a genetic disease that's not listed there, for whatever reason, perhaps it's a very small, ultra rare mutation, or whatever reason there isn't broad interest in that, how do you go about garnering support and interest in that? You guys have some thoughts on that?
That's a very intriguing question. There are practical aspects to life. Car mechanics are either going to fix a particular type of car or they're not. They're more likely to know how to fix a car if there are many of them around that need fixing. But if there are 2 in the world, it's unlikely you're going to find many car mechanics who have the expertise or the knowledge or the ability to tackle that question. And disease is the same way. At the moment, how would you mobilize? Well, the best way would be to find others like yourself who have the issue and make a little noise to the Foundation Fighting Blindness, make a little noise to retina researchers who are doing this kind of work. I think the generous answer to this is that all of these trials are going to progress from the more common conditions to the more rare conditions. Eventually, all of those conditions, essentially all of those conditions will get attention, but it's going to take some time to get there.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. The other thing to mention is there are gene, as Dr. Sieving was talking about, gene agnostic approaches, and the Foundation Fighting Blindness is working, devoting a lot of resources to developing platform technologies that, building on the success in maybe more common diseases or maybe more unique diseases. Like RP65 was uniquely chosen, not because it's common, not because it's common at all, but because it was likely to work, and it did. And it led to development and interest and applicability for lots of other sorts of rare diseases that has really transformed the way we think about these conditions and really increased interest in the field. So I don't think you have to lose hope because you have something uncommon. I think there's lots of developments going on that are going to have relevance for you, either through sort of pan gene, like gene agnostic types of approaches, platform approaches. Any success in any field, honestly, like elevates all the boats. So I think all of us are benefited by the interest in rare diseases that's going on, whether they be super rare or not as rare. The Foundation Fighting Blindness has recently, through our consortium, initiated an ultra rare study, which is called the UniRare study, where we're specifically dedicating attention and resources to the study of people with very rare inherited retinal degeneration. So there's a hope of understanding those specifically because it's sometimes harder to get attention and noise and resources devoted to those less common conditions. So keep supporting Foundation Fighting Blindness, keep making noise, keep paying attention, because there's a lot going on that I think is going to benefit all of us.
Fantastic. And thank you so much. We're at the end of time, and there are many more questions I'd love to ask, but I just want to end the call here, and maybe let me turn it back off to Nathan for any closing comments.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne, and thank you all, everyone, for joining today. Thank you to our wonderful presenters. We just want to remind anybody that if you have questions that weren't answered today, if you think of them later, you can always email us at bayarea@fightingblindness.org. Like Dr. Duncan mentioned, if you're looking to find other people who are affected by the same disease you are, you can always email us. If you're not in the Bay Area, you can always reach out at chapters@fightingblindness.org. And just to remind you guys on what Dr. Duncan said about the foundation, we offer free genetic testing. Just talk to your doctor. If you need to find a doctor to get you the genetic testing, you can always reach out to us. We can provide you with one in the area or several in the area that do the genetic testing. It's free. You can then you can opt into our My Retina Tracker registry and get connected to any clinical trials that might be affected to your gene. So we definitely want to encourage you all to do that. But again, any questions, it's bayarea@fightingblindness.org. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar along with any slides we presented, and that will be posted on the Bay Area chapter website as well. So thank you all so much. Thank you to Wayne and Eric for moderating our 2 panels. And we look forward to hosting more of these events in the next year, as well as some social activities and other fun things in the Bay Area. Again, if you're not in the Bay Area, please email chapters@Fighting Blindness because we got things planned all over the country. We're looking forward to a good 2022. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with us, and we will check in with you later. Thank you so much.